morning. Are you guys sleeping still? Open up your Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter number 2. 2 Samuel chapter number 2. We continue our study on the life of David. If you remember, we've been talking about all the different parts of David's life. He has just finally gotten to the point where he's become king. King of Judah, not king of all of Israel, but king of Judah at this point. And so he is just getting to that place where he's getting what God predicted 15 years earlier. And he's taking it slow, doing it the right way. If you remember, he was not quick to come and take the throne we learned about last week. And he just moved slowly and steadily. But first of all, he sought the Lord. He sought the Lord in what he was doing. We're going to see today that he had a heart of godly strength. That's going to be the lesson for today, a heart of godly strength. Here in 2 Samuel 2, we kind of started off last week with this, but we'll start in verse 1. It says, "And it came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said, Go up. And David said, Whither shall I go up? And he said, Unto Hebron. So David went up to thither, and his two wives also, and Ahinoam and Jezreelitis, and the Jezreelitis, and Abigail, Nabal's wife, the Carmelite. And his men that were with him did bring up every man his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came there, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah, and they told David, saying that the men of Jabesh-Gilead were there that buried Saul. And we're going to skip for a little bit here, because we already talked about that last week, where we talked about these guys that David took care of because they did right to Saul by taking care of him and burying him and doing all of that. Look down now with me at verse number 11. It says, In the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. I just want to stop there for a minute. I want you to see here that David has now reigned in there 7 years and 6 months. Now, that's not at the point we're getting to here, but this is where David has reigned there in Judah. That's how long he reigned for. I want you to keep that in mind because it's going to be important later to see exactly what is happening between Judah and Israel. And in the house of Israel, we're going to see exactly what happens, and that's what we're going to cover off a lot of today. But I want you to see that David stayed in Judah and was king of Judah for 7.5 years. That's important. Remember that number. Verse 12, it says, And Abner, the son of Ner, servants of Ahishabeth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Who is Abner? Let's stop here for a minute. Who is Abner? Captain of what? Whose army? Saul's army. Not David's. Saul's army. Okay, this is important. Okay, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of who? David. So who is Joab? Captain of David's army. Okay, this is important, okay? He went out and met together by the pool of Gibeon, and they sat down, the one on the one side of the pool and the one on the other side of the pool. And Abner said to Joab, Let the young man now arise and play before us. And Joab said, Let them arise. I want you just to kind of see the tension that's here right now, okay? Can you imagine if you have somebody that was the captain of the army of the enemy of David, and then you have David and his captain, and this captain, his leader, is dead. Okay? So I want you to see that he has no power now. He's powerless. Okay? So I want you to see that, and I want you to understand that. Now notice when he says, and Abner said to who? To Joab. How do you think it makes him feel that he has to go not even to the king, but he has to go to the king's second in command? So now Joab feels like he's come down a couple rings now, and he's no longer the most trusted advisor and can kind of command people. I just want you to see that as we continue. It says in verse 13, Then arose and went over by number 12 of Benjamin, which pertained to Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. And they caught everyone his fellow by the head, and thrust his sword in his fellow's side. So they fell down together, wherefore the place was called Helkath Azarim, which is in Gibeon. And there was a very sore battle that day, and Abner was beaten, and the men of Israel before the servants of David. And there were 3 sons of Zeruiah there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was light of foot and a wild roe. And Asahel pursued after Abner, and in going he turned not to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, Art thou Asahel? And he answered, I am. And Abner said to him, Turn thee aside to the right hand or to the left, and lay thee hold on one of the young men, and take thee his armor. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asahel, Turn thee aside from the following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? Howbeit he refused to turn aside. Wherefore Abner with the hinder end of his spear smote him under the 5th rib, and the spear came out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. And it came to pass that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell down and died stood still. Joab also and Abishai pursued after Abner, and the sun went down when they were come to the hill of Amnah, that lieth before Giath, by the way of the wilderness of Gibeah. And the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together after Abner, and became one troop, and stood on the top of an hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, Shall the sword devour forever? Knowest thou not that it will be bitterness in the latter end? How long it shall be then, ere thou bid the people return from following their brethren? And Joab said, As God liveth, unless thou hadst spoken, surely then in the morning the people had gone up every one from following his brother. So Joab blew a trumpet, and all the people stood still, and pursued after Israel no more, neither fought they any more. And Abner and his men walked all that night through the plain, and passed over Jordan, and went through all Bithron, and they came to Mahanaim. And Joab returned from following Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there lacked of David's servants 19 men of Asahel. But the servants of David had smitten of Benjamin and of Abner's men, so that 360 men died. And they took up Asahel and buried him in the sepulchre of his father, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at the break of day. All right, and we're going to stop here for a minute, but we're going to cover 2 more chapters today, Lord willing. So that's where we're at in chapter 2. This is where we kind of set the stage and what's happening here. You know, Ecclesiastes 1:9 tells us that there's nothing new under the sun. And what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a power struggle. There's a power struggle going on between Abner and Joab, between David's men and Saul's men, if you will. Now, it says of Ashibabeth's men, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want you to see here that there's a war going on internally, a civil war, if you will. And this is a battle for the throne. This is a battle to see who's going to truly run all of Israel. There's 2 different divisions now. There's the north and the south, and there's this war between the 2 of them. Do we see wars in the north and the south of countries often? Have we seen that a few places? Yeah, we've seen that, right? We've seen that in Korea. We've seen that in Vietnam. You see these wars where the north and the south battle each other. I want you to see here, though, that this is nothing new. Power struggles have existed since the beginning of time. Eve had a power struggle to eat the fruit, right? The whole reason why that she ate that fruit, that forbidden fruit, was because it said it gave them power, right? Gave them knowledge, gave them the ability to know right from wrong, gave them the ability to be like God. That's what Eve wanted. That's what she desired when she ate that fruit, right? It was Abel there. She got that power. We also see it in Cain and Abel, right? Cain and Abel's life. Cain wanted power over Abel, his brother, because Abel was blessed and Cain was not, because he gave the right sacrifice and not the wrong sacrifice. We also see it as we go on with the Pharisees struggling with Jesus, right? They didn't like that this person had come in with a new gospel, although it wasn't really new. It was just the right interpretation of the old gospel. And Jesus came and he was filling the whole country and the region with all this doctrine. The Pharisees didn't like that. And there was a power struggle there that ended up getting Jesus killed. Now, that was all part of God's plan, but that's what was happening. They didn't like that Jesus was moving people away from religion and to a relationship with God. You know, God's always wanted a relationship with his people since the beginning of time. He chose a people because he wanted them to be his people. You see it all throughout the Old Testament. You'll be my people and I'll be your God. You see this over and over and over again. This is what God's wanted. Jesus fulfilled that, and he showed them what exactly that meant. That's what we see here going on in this battle here between David's men and Abner's men. And you get to see that this is something that started long, long ago. We saw that Saul caused Abner to have this hatred towards David. And you're going to see that, remember, Abner used to be in the same army as David, right? They used to be in the same place. They used to be brethren that would work together. But Saul changed all that. So we see now a division between these two people. After Saul's death, David sought the Lord. He asked the Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go up? Do you want me to go up into this country, into this place where I'm from? Do you want me to go up to Judah? Do you want me to dwell up in any of the cities up there? And then God says to David, yes, go up. And then David doesn't stop there. He doesn't say, okay, I'm just going to go up. David could have gone straight and took the throne, but that's not what he did. He said, where do you want me to go? And God told him to go to Hebron. Was Hebron the place of the king, of the kingly crown area? No. That was in Jerusalem. He was not supposed to go there. He was supposed to go to the place that God told him to went, and he went there. And he served there as king for 7.5 years. Remember that again. We'll get there in a minute. But over at the house of Saul, people were scrambling because they were trying to figure out who was going to be the next heir to the kingship in Israel. We knew that David was the heir. Abner knew this. I want you to understand that too. Abner knew full well that David was the next king of Israel. He already knew this. This is not something that should have been a surprise to Abner. But Abner didn't want that. He was the army commander. He was the one in charge. He wanted a king that he could control. So you know what? He lifted up Ashibabeth, the son of Saul, and said, hey, you're going to be, this is Saul's third son. His first two sons had died. And so now his third son was rightful heir to the throne. And Abner came to him and said, you're going to be king of Israel. And he exalted him. But it was Abner that was actually the one controlling everything. He was the actual one running the country. And you'll see that throughout what we're going to study today. But from this point right here, what we're seeing is that there's a commander that's trying to set up a next king. He knew that if David took control of all of Israel and Judah, that he would have no power. And Abner didn't want that. He wanted that power. So what's Abner do? He decides that he's going to make a plan and an effort to keep what Saul had given him. He's going to exalt Ashibetheth as king of Israel. And this will spark a further struggle for power between the house of David and the house of Saul. We see this now. What we just read is a really little small battle, but you see how many people died in this battle? How many people died? Huh? 300 and how much? 60. 360. 303 score people. 360 people died in this little battle. This is a small little battle over what? How did it all start? Abner telling Joab, I want this to happen. And then 12 of each tribe went and fought with each other. And they went and they fell. And 12 of David's servants and 12 of each, not of each tribe, but of each camp, if you will. Shouldn't say 12 tribes. That would be 144. That's too many. 12 of each camp kind of went against each other. So 12 of the tribe of Benjamin went over, and 12 of the servants of David. And you see here that there's a battle going on. Now what happens? The battle ends, people have died, but then people still aren't happy. Joab's little brother goes and follows Abner because he sees what's going on. He sees that Abner is a bad man, a wicked man, that he's not doing right. And so Asahel, he follows Abner. Remember that, because this starts something even bigger. And I want you to see how Abner reacts towards him too, because it shows that Abner's not all bad, but he's not all good, that's for sure. So these two things happen. Look over at verse number 24 with me. It says, Joab also and Abishai pursued after Abner. And the sun went down when they were come to the hill of Abner and Eliath before Gaiath by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. And the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together after Abner and became one troop and stood on top of the hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, Shall the sword devour forever? Knowest thou not it will be bitterness in the latter end? How long shall it be then ere thou bid the people return from following their brethren? I want you to see here what Abner says to Joab. Now remember, Abner has just killed Joab's brother. But look back up with me. Look at verse 19. It says, And Asahel pursued after Abner, and in going he turned not to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. Then Abner looked behind him and said, Art thou Asahel? And he answered, I am. And Abner said to him, Turn thee aside to the right hand or to the left, and lay thee hold on one of the young men, and take thee his armor. But Asahel would not turn aside from following after him. And Abner said again to Asahel, Turn thee aside from following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? You see here that Abner tries to get Asahel to stop following him. He says, hey, I don't want to have to kill you because I know what that's going to cause. So stop. Go over there or go over there. I don't care which way you go. Just don't follow me anymore. But Asahel, he was a wild roe, the Bible says. He was not somebody that you were going to tell what to do. If you see that in verse 18, it says he was light of foot as a wild roe. He was going to go where he wanted to go, and he was going to do what he wanted to do, and he wasn't going to listen to what this guy had to say. If you think about that, he's a deer just prancing through the forest, and he was going to follow him. He was going to continue to do it. So Abner slew him. He didn't want to. He tried not to, but he did, because he wasn't going to have this guy follow him his whole life. He wasn't going to let him kill him. It was a thing of self-defense for Abner. But then Abner speaks again, and when he speaks again, he speaks to Joab this time. And I want you to see what Joab does. Joab, in verse 27, it says, And Joab said, As God liveth, unless thou hadst spoken, surely then the morning the people had gone up every one from following his brother. What he says is, if you didn't say this, if you didn't call for this peace treaty, which is what he's pretty much saying, he's saying, hey, don't make brother come against brother here. Let's not fight. Otherwise, we're going to have it forever. And that was a smart thing that Abner did. And Joab says, if you didn't say that, we would have for sure been having this forever. We would have been following you. But because you did, Joab blew that trumpet, and all the people stood still and pursued after Israel no more. So they stopped. They didn't follow. This power struggle was coming to a conclusion for now. It was coming to a place where there was a truce that had been entered into. But that's not where it stops, and we'll see more in a little bit. The key here is we want to see that there was a vendetta that had to be paid because Asahel had died. Joab and Abishai, the two brothers, wanted to see him dead. But then Abner does something. He does something different that changes things. He says, hey, you don't want to see brother devour brother. And Joab is such a good man of God that he says, okay, let's stop here. Let's stop this civil war from taking place. Let's stop having these battles. And I want you to see that, we have a civil war, if you will, inside of us. We have this power struggle that's going on inside of each and every one of us if you're a saved believer in here today. If you're an unbeliever, you don't have a power struggle. The struggle is not there because there's no thing. But if you're a believer, you have a power struggle going in. The spirit wars against the flesh. And all the time there's a battle going on. And there will be no truce in that battle. There is no truce. It's always the flesh always wars against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. It's always going to happen forever. And this struggle between David and his men, and Saul and his men, or Abner's men, or Ashibadeth's men, or whoever you want to say his men they are, but they're really Saul's men, and Abner's now and the one in control. This battle's going on, and it's a good picture of the flesh against the spirit. We have to decide who we're going to yield to. Are we going to yield to the flesh, or are we going to yield to the spirit? In our lives, we see this kind of portrayed here. Look over at Galatians chapter number 2 with me. Galatians chapter number 2. Verse number 20. It says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. The key here is this battle's never going to end between the flesh and the spirit. That's why we need to mortify our flesh every day. Because if we mortify our flesh, if we die to self and let the spirit rule and reign in our life, then that's when the battle ends for that day, right? Every day it's going to rise up again. And we have to decide that we're just going to kill the flesh for that day. And for that day, the spirit's going to reign. And the next day, we need to choose to do it all over again. And every minute of every day, we need to make that decision to follow the spirit and to ignore the flesh. We need to make sure that we're doing right. The flesh is always going to be in a power struggle with the spirit. The flesh cries out for power, for control, for gratification, and for approval. And this power struggle is never a good thing. We can't give into it. Victory's only going to come when we crucify the flesh and we let the spirit have full authority in our hearts and minds. We need to make sure that we're doing right, not wrong. We have a choice to make. Every single moment of every single day, we can choose to yield to the flesh or yield to the spirit. Which choice are we going to make? We can say that the house of Saul represents the flesh. They always choose gratification and power and the things of they want control and all of those things that the flesh wants. Whereas David represents the spirit. He wants God's will. David didn't come and take control of Israel. He didn't fight. Could they have won that battle if they continued? Absolutely. They would have won that battle. I want you to know here that David doesn't even know this is going on at this point. He doesn't even know what's happening. This is not a David trying to take control. This is Abishai and Joab going after their brother's killer. That's what's happening. But they could have pursued and they could have won, and David could have been in control of all of Israel right now. But he's not. And he won't be, because that wasn't God's will. And David was yielding to God's will. You know, Abner will win a few victories. We'll see throughout this time that Abner's he's going to win some things. And you know, sometimes the flesh is going to win in our lives. Sometimes Satan is going to win battles, but he's going to lose the war. And that's what we have to realize, is that you can be on the winning side, you can be on the losing side, and you can be like David, where you swap sides, right? We have to be careful we don't do that we're not flip-flopping against the enemies of God and saying, okay, today I'm going to be on this side, today I'm going to be on that side. No, we need to stay with the armies of God. That's where the victory is. That's where the true benefit is. That's where we see God's true control of our life. In the end, God will have his way, and Abner's short-lived power will be extinguished. He's going to be done. He's going to die. You're going to see it. We're going to see that in just a few chapters we're going to cover today. It's not a long period of time that Abner gets to live. Now let's look at chapter 3. 2 Samuel chapter number 3. It says, now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And unto David were sons born in Hebron, and his firstborn was Amnon of the Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess. And the second was Chileab of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And the third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. And the fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. And the sixth, Ithream, by David's wife, They were born to David in Hebron by Eglah, David's wife. They were born in Hebron. So you see, he has 6 sons that are born to him here. By how many women? 6. Not a good thing, right? Part of David's fall right here. We're going to get into verse 7 a little bit, but I want to give you a sneak little peek. What's going on in this chapter? There's polygamy, extramarital affairs, deception, manipulation, estranglement, political power plays, murder, intrigue, revenge, and death. And no, this isn't a TV commercial for the latest sitcom on television or the latest daytime soap opera. This is the biblical soap opera of Abner and his men and the battle they have with David. Look at verse 7. I want you to see this and understand what this meant in this time. It says, and Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Ahiah, and Ishbosheth said to Abner, wherefore hast thou gone into unto my father's concubine? Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul, thy father, and to his brethren, and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David? And thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman? So do God to Abner, and more also, except as the Lord hath sworn to David, even so I do to him, to translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba. And he could not answer Abner a word, because he feared him. So I want you to see here, the king is afraid of who? Abner. So king of Israel is afraid of Abner. Now, in biblical times, if you were to sleep with a dead king's wife, that would be an act of treason, because that person belonged to the successor. That's how it worked in biblical times. And so when that happened, that would be an act of treason. That would be something that they would kill you for in those days. But you know, Ishbosheth, he wasn't going to battle with Abner, because Abner was truly the one in control. He was the one with all the power. He was the one making all the decisions. And Abner used manipulation here. He manipulates Ishbosheth and says, hey, listen, I'm the one who's kept you from getting killed by David. Was that true, by the way? No. David is the one who kept him from being killed by David. If David wanted to kill Ishbosheth, he would have killed Ishbosheth. He didn't want to. In fact, he made Jonathan a promise that he wouldn't hurt his house. And that was not the plan of David. He did not want to do anything to hurt that house. This war was coming from Abner and everything with the power struggle that was there. And Abner's using it as a way to manipulate Ishbosheth. And Ishbosheth feared him. And Abner sent messages to David on his behalf, saying, who is the hand? Saying also, make the league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee, to bring about all Israel unto thee. And he said, well, I will make a league with thee, but one thing I require of thee, and that is thou shalt not see my face, except thou shalt first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face. I want you to see something here that's going on. Abner comes to David and says, I want to make a truce. I want to make an agreement that we can be friends, that we can work together, and eventually I know that you will be king. And David says, okay, Abner, but I want one thing. What's he ask Abner for? His wife. He says, I want my wife back. Remember, David married Michal, Saul's daughter, and he loved her. And she loved him. But because of everything with Saul, David had to flee from her. And so he has not seen Michal in 15 years. I can't even imagine being without my wife for a few weeks, never mind 15 years. This is something that David was desiring. He wanted so bad. He made this agreement with Abner because he wanted his wife back. Here in 2 Samuel 3, we see there's a myriad of people. There's a bunch of sinful choices and political moves motivated by hidden agendas. So we went from power struggles to hidden agendas. Now we see some revenge, and then we see David becomes king of both Israel and Judah. Here we see something happening in these battles that changes who David is and who Abner is. At least we hope. And I'll get more into that in a minute, that it changed Abner. Look down at verse number 16. It says, and her husband went with her, and weeping behind her to Maharaim. Then said Abner unto him, go return. And he returned. And Abner had communication with the elders of Israel, saying, ye ought for David in times past to be king over you. Now then do it, for the Lord hath spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel. Get back up to verse 14. I skipped some. And David sent messengers unto Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, deliver me my wife Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, and even from Philtel to the son of Lachish. And her husband went with her along weeping behind to Baharim. Now in verse 17, and Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, ye ought for David in times past to be king over you. Now then do it, that the Lord spoke of David, saying, by the hand of thy servant David, I will save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines, and out of the hand of all their enemies. And Abner also spake in the ears of Benjamin, and Abner went also to speak in the ears of David in Hebron, and all that seemed good to Israel, and seemed good to the whole house of Benjamin. And so Abner came to David to Hebron, and 20 men with him. And David made Abner and the men that were with him a feast. And then Abner said unto David, I will rise and go, and will gather all Israel unto my lord the king, that they may make a league with thee, that thou mayest reign over all thine heart, over all that thy heart desireth. And David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from the pursuing a troop, and brought in a great spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. When Joab and all the host that was with him were come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he had sent him away, and he is gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, what hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone? Thou knowest Abner the son of Ner, and he came to deceive thee, and to know thy going out and thy coming in, and to know all that thou doest. And when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, and brought him again from the well of Sirah. But David knew it not. And when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate, and spake with him quietly, and smote him there under the 5th rib, and he died, for the blood of Asahel his brother. And after, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house, and let there fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread. So Joab and Abishai the brothers slew Abner, because he had slain their brother Asahel in Gibeon in the battle. And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, rend your clothes, and gird you with sackcloth, and mourn before Abner. And the king David himself followed the bier. And they buried Abner in Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented over Abner, and said, died Abner as a fool dieth? Thy hands were not bound, nor the feet put into fetters, as a man that faileth before wicked men. So fellest thou. And all the people wept over him again. And when all the people came to cause David to eat meat while it was yet day, David sware, saying, so do God to me, and more also, if I taste bread or aught else till the sun be down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as whatsoever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it was not of the king to slay Abner the son of Ner. And the king said unto his servants, know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel? And I am this day weak, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. We'll stop there for a minute before we get into chapter 4. But I want you to see what just happened. There's a lot that we just saw that happened here. And David is very wise. He's a very wise king, and we're going to see that here. Abner starts off by gaining control. He has all of Israel under his control, right? He's in control of Israel. Not Ishbosheth, not the king, but Abner. But what ends up happening is Abner realizes that God is in control. You see here that he starts to see that no matter what he does, he's going to lose. Abner starts to see that. He starts to see that he's going to lose. And so you know what he does? He switches sides. He comes to David and says, hey, David, I'll make you king over Israel. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go win all the people's hearts to you. I'm going to take care of it all. He starts to change. He starts to be different. he defers his allegiance to the house of David while declaring power in God's word. Look at verse number 18. It says, "Now then do it, for the Lord hath spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David I will save my people out of the hand of the Philistines and out of the hand of all their enemies." So Abner speaks the word of God, and he says that, hey, this is what God says, and I can't go against it. This is who's supposed to be king. But what a lesson this is just for all of us to understand that we need to just do it. Do you notice it says there, just do it. I'm going to make sure that we just make David king. Verse 18 says, "Now then do it." Why should we do it? Because God said so. It's a lesson for us. It's a lesson to show us that when God says something, we need to just do it. His will, his direction, his way is the best way. We need to be obedient. We have to give up our agenda for his. I'll tell you, I don't really know if I believe Abner's really changed or not, or if it's just another deceit or trick like Joab thought. I don't know. We'll never know. Why? Because Joab ends up killing him. But what we do know is at this point he talks right. He says the right things. And Christian, what he says is so important for our lives. We need to give up our own agendas. Abner, at least seemingly, gave up his agenda for power, his agenda to control Israel, because he knew it wasn't God's will. What's God asking us to give up today, Christian, that we're holding on to, that we won't let go of, that we won't push away and say, you know what, God, I want this really, really bad, but I know you don't want it, so I'm going to let it go. What is it? What is it that God's telling us that we need to let go of? What is it that he wants us to stop moving towards? You know, like I said, Abner, he doesn't seem like he's genuine. He doesn't seem like he's real in this situation. But I don't know. Remember, him and David used to be friends. Maybe he did realize it. Maybe he did change. We don't know. But what we do know is that he was playing the puppet master. He was the one controlling all the marionette strings in the kingdom before. Look at verse 10. I just want you to see this. It says, "To translate the kingdom from the house of Saul, to set up the throne of David over Israel, over Judah, from Dan even to Beersheba." You see here that it says that Ishbosheth could not answer Abner, verse 11, a word because he feared him. So who was in control? Abner was. But what we see here is that he eventually, at least seemingly, yields that control back to David, who it belonged to. He returns from the raid with Joab returns from the raid with much spoil, and he learns that Abner had visited David and that David had not killed him. Joab comes to David and is like, why did he let him go? Why is he gone? Again, because David, that wasn't God's will. And so Joab goes out and deceitfully kills Abner. He doesn't tell David what he's going to do. He just goes and does it. Even after David, I'm sure, told him, hey, it's not God's will that I kill Abner right now. That's not what God wants. But Joab goes and does it anyway. And something happens when David hears that Abner is dead. He, first of all, verse number 28, it says, "And afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner, the son of Ner." Now, I believe this statement to be two things. I believe it's the heart of David. I believe David loved Abner as one of his countrymen, as one of his comrades, one of his friends. But I also believe it was a political move. We'll see why later. Verse 29, "So let it rest on the head of Joab and all his father's house, and let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread." You see here that he kind of puts a curse on Joab's house. He pronounces this against Joab and his future generations, gets him to a place where he's not happy with what happened with Joab. Remember, this is his most trusted advisor. This is the king, the captain of his army. This is the person that's in charge of David's army, and David's not happy. But then I want you to see that David not only is unhappy, he then mourns, and not even just mourns, but he laments. He cries. over Abner. And he has a whole thing here in verses 31 to 39 that we already read. I won't reread it for sake of time. But I want you to see here that David is sorry that Abner is dead. He's not happy. Similarly, like he was with Saul. He's not happy. He's not happy that this is what's supposed to happen. He knows eventually he's going to be king of all Israel, but he didn't think it was going to be yet. Look over at Isaiah chapter number 14. Isaiah 14. Verse number 27. Verse 27 says, "For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, and who shall turn it back?" What it's talking about here is what God has said is going to happen is going to happen. And there's nothing that we can do to change it. And David knew that. He knew that he was going to eventually be king. He knew for sure that it was coming. He knew everything that was supposed to happen in the timing of God was going to happen. He didn't want to rush it. But Joab didn't quite understand that. He wanted revenge for his brother, partly. And then also, he didn't like the fact that while he was away, Abner snuck in. There was a little power struggle there, because if Abner becomes the second in charge, Joab goes down a step. Right? And he didn't want that. Christian, how many times in your life, in my life, have we gone and done things because we're afraid somebody else is going to take our position, or is going to take our relationship, or is going to do things? We have jealousy. We have some pride that gets up inside of us and gets us to a place where we do things we shouldn't do. We need to be careful of that. We need to be careful to not let other people hinder our walk with God. Follow God the way he tells us to follow him. All right. I don't know how much time we have for this, so I think we'll probably wait to get into chapter 4 until next week. But I want you to see something here in chapter 4, and we'll kind of start with it. It opens up that not only is Abner dead, but now Ishbosheth is dead. Look at verse 1. It says, "And when Saul's son heard that Abner was dead in Hebron, his hands were feeble, and all the Israelites were troubled. And Saul's son had 2 men that were captains of bands. The son of the one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, the sons of Rimmon of Betherite, of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was reckoned to Benjamin. And the Beerothites fled to Gittim, and were sojourners until this day. And Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son that was lame on his feet. And he was 5 years old when the tidings came of Saul of Jonathan out of Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it came to pass that as she made haste, that he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. And the sons of Rimmon, and hold on to that name Mephibosheth. We're going to get back to that in chapter 9 when we get there. Amazing story. Love it. One of my most favorite stories in all the Bible. Verse number 5, it says, "And the sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, and Rechab, and Baanah, went and came into the heat of the day into the house of Ishbosheth, who lay on the bed at noon. And they came thither into the midst of the house, and as they would have fetched wheat, they smote him under the 5th rib. And Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. For when they came into the house, he lay on his bed in the bedchamber, and they smote him and slew him, and beheaded him, and took his head and gat them away through the plain all night. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth unto David to Hebron, and said to the king, Behold, the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, thine enemy, which sought thy life, and the Lord hath avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and of his seed." We're going to stop right there, because how many of you know what happened when this happened? What do you think? David was happy or sad? Think he was angry or was he excited? We'll get into it next week. But I want you to see here, David's now going to become king of all of Israel. And we're going to talk about the time frame. Remember, I told you to remember that 7.5 years, because we're going to see how long Ishbosheth reigned for, and it's different. And I want you to see that there's a space of time in between the time of when David became king and when Ishbosheth became king. I hope this lesson was a little bit more of a background story to what we're going to get into next week, and we're going to really get into this. But the thing that we saw so far is we saw a power struggle. Then we saw that people had these hidden agendas that they were trying to get forward. Do we see those today? Do we see it in our political system today? Is there hidden agendas and power struggles? It's all happening, right? Next week, we're going to talk about selfish ambitions, about these two men who we've never heard of before. They're new characters. They're new people that come in. And that's where we'll pick up next week. But I want you to see that nothing has changed. There's nothing new under the sun. It's the same. You see these new people that enter, and they do something because they think that's what the king's going to like. They think it's going to help them. But we'll see if it does. Belushi, can you close us in a word of prayer?